You've just taken an interest in becoming the game master for one of the most famous and popular role-playing games of all time. You've grabbed all the books that you could possibly use for research. You've grabbed all the dice that you possibly could so that you could roll them for powerful spells and monumentous monsters that are going to come and attack a party of players that you've brought around the table to partake in your grand adventures. But then you look inside those pages and you realize that there's a lot of complex material, and you start to become overwhelmed, and it gets to the point where you think, you know what, I don't think I'm cut out for this. Well, worry no more, friends, because with a little help from this custom workshop that I've devised that was inspired by the 5th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, I'm going to present to you considerations you should make, questions you should answer, and steps that will potentially, with time and effort, lead to you becoming a much more confident, knowledgeable, passionate, and overall fun Novice DM.
You've picked up your books from your local comic shop. You've got lots of dice to roll. But you're stressed by all the pages and responsibility, and you fear you'll lose control. So you wanna be a DM, but you don't know where to start. Me neither.
So, introduction to the workshop. What are we going to dive into first? Are we going to expand on the ideas of NPC motivations? Are we going to expand on map building? Are we going to look into the intricacies of understanding what skills best attribute to which characters and how the environments that they're surrounded in, how these could potentially affect them, and the constant random encounters that they could have and the planned ones? Are we going to start creating campaigns on the first day? No, of course not. What we're going to be doing is actually what I think is the most important thing for any starting out and even like long-running dungeon master. And the reason I think it's the most important is because I think this is something that turns the game into something that isn't just a game, but turns it into something more personal. But you know what? To do this part, we don't need any of this stuff. So let's just put it aside for right now. There we go. Everything's to the side, and don't worry, we will get to it eventually. But I want to make something clear right off the top here for this introduction. This is going to be an actual workshop. This isn't just a video for you to put on in the background while you just, sit down and watch some other internet videos, play your video games, or, make your lunch. This is something I want you to genuinely work at on your own time. I want you to actually start investing your time into this game because, let's face it, Dungeons & Dragons is a big investment, more so than any other games. Sure, you could, make up little notes on certain games that you do like, maybe strategies on like, oh, how do I win Monopoly better? But this is a game that really takes your own time to create it, especially when you're a dungeon master. Because what you're doing essentially is you're telling a story. And maybe it's an epic fantasy or a mundane kind of fantasy. But you're trying to tell a story with other people. Other players are at the table and they're listening to you and they're looking to you as the dungeon master for guidance. And sometimes they need clarifications. Sometimes they need inspiration and maybe they're like, hey, what could I possibly do here? And you need to be there for them. You've got to ask yourself the hardest question that you're ever going to ask yourself in this entire process. And that question is, why do you want to be a dungeon master? Seriously. Why do you want to do it? Because if the answer is, I want to tell epic stories and fantasy, and I want to tell great tales of great heroes or great villains rising up in the world, cool. Write a novel about it. Write a screenplay. Write something and work at something other than this, because this is a collaborative effort. This is not just your envisioning of what a grand tale is. This is a game. A game where you are sharing it with your friends or even strangers. You are committing your time and effort to make sure that they have a good experience and that everything works for you. That's not nothing. So why are you doing it? Why do you want to do it? I believe that leading by example is the best way to show people the way and to guide people. And so I'm going to do that. Very first question, the hardest one that I'm going to answer, why I decided to become a dungeon master. Now, I've been considering all the different reasons for why I decided to become a dungeon master, and I was thinking about, some epic tales, and again, in a fantasy game, trying to think of some great epic origin story. But really, it came down to three things, and those three things are the hardest things to talk about. The first one is, obviously, when I was younger, I guess I should confess, I didn't care about this game at all. At all. When I was like 11 or 12 years old, I played the first edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't realize it was called first edition. I just thought it was the game. I thought that was the game that existed for years. But my uncle and my cousins introduced me to first edition Dungeons and Dragons, and that is all I played. And I only played it 3 or 4 times before my uncle's even saying, yeah, we're not going to play this because, you're being a jerk to your brother. It's like, you guys don't get along when you play this game. And it's, yeah, we didn't. I thought this was a game for mature kids. And I said, you're not mature enough. So I basically didn't like this game because I thought it was complicated and hard, and also just something that was, not, silly or fun. It was like you come to the table and you've got to be on your stuff. You got to know what you're doing. And, a couple years later, I decided, I want to give it another try. And I went to another game store to play a public game. I even actually paid money for it. And it was one of the worst experiences I've ever had. I don't know if it was with 5th edition. I don't know what it was, but I hated it. And I never touched the game again. It was so bad, it turned me off from the game completely. About a year and 3 months ago, I saw some actor friends of mine. We were in a show together, and I saw them play it, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is what the game is. This is actually really fun. And I wanted to partake in it. And at first, I kind of was looking at the professional angle of it because I was trying to figure out where my career could go, and I heard these guys did some stuff with their career. So I was like, okay, cool. I'll have an avenue into my career. And I started watching other professionals do this, and I was inspired to be like, oh my gosh, I could do something just like that. Oh my goodness, this is incredible. And I started reaching out to my uncle again, and I was like, hey, I've picked up the player's handbook, and I'm looking through it, and I got this interest for one character who's like a gnome ranger, and it's just such a fun idea, and I really like wacky characters. And he's like, oh cool, I'm working as a human paladin. I'm like, of course you are. He's a Christian guy, loves like strong men. It's like, okay, yeah, cool. So, we started talking about it, and I was like, okay, let's talk about our characters. Yeah, sure. And then we even arranged that we were going to come together. And we were actually going to play a role-playing game, not Dungeons & Dragons, but we were going to invest again as a family into this role-playing experience. We haven't done that since I was 11 or 12, and I was like 21 at the time. I just turned 21. I was so excited to be able to do this with my family for the first time in over 10 years. And then 2 weeks before we were going to do it, I got a call from my mom, and she said my uncle had died. And it came out of nowhere. The man was 49 years old. He was going to have his 50th birthday in 2 months. And I went home. I was in Calgary at the time, and I live up in the Edmonton area. I went home immediately. And we had organized that we were going to play this other role-playing game in 2 weeks. And I said, you know what? We're not going to cancel this. We're going to come together. And while we're grieving and while we're sad, I dedicated 2 weeks to make sure that I created my very first custom game. And it was with a system I knew more, like, better than Dungeons and Dragons, so I felt a little more confident. But I was nervous and terrified, and when the day came, I was so excited, and it turned into a 3-part campaign, and it was amazing. And we're continuing with that game. We still do it with the same characters that they have, and that's the first reason. My uncle was our dungeon master, and he was the man who's kind of leading this. And when he died, I felt that I needed to fill in some kind of spot. I probably didn't, but I wanted to. I wanted my family to know we're not just going to give this up. This is so important, and this is such an important thing to him and to us. And so we got to the table, we said a prayer, And we did it, and we prayed at the end, and that was what we did. That was our game. So to me, the reason one I'm a dungeon master is for my family, and it brings me closer to my uncle, who I was becoming closer to until he died, and there's a spiritual connection there. Second reason is kind of tying back to that family aspect, but more so with other people I play with. I know a lot of people don't invest their time into this game the same way that dungeon masters have to. I'm actually playing a campaign right now with people who, they only have small amounts of the resources or the necessary ones. They're like, oh, what do I need to do? What can I do with this? And they've never played the game before. Seriously, anyway. Some of them have never played a role-playing game in their lives. But I said, you know what? I want to know what they can do, and I want to inspire them to be able to break out of that shell. That nervous, I don't know what I can do. And that's another reason I want to do it, because I want new players and old players to open their minds up a bit. I want them to see all the potentials and all the possibilities in this game, because it's not just, as I kind of grew up on it, it's not just about good versus evil. There's a lot in this game that it has a possibility. And I've seen it with my friends who've never played it before. They're always looking forward to our next session, and I'm always looking forward to talking to them about it. And I always want to hear what the hell they're gonna say, because it's gonna be so much fun. And it's gonna be something I remember and cherish throughout every single day of my life. And I remember a year ago we started our campaign, and we only played 2 sessions, but I remembered nearly every single detail that we put into that game. And a year later, we're now seriously continuing it, and it's still really fun. And I want to be there for players who have never done this before, but I want to be there for old players too. But that can always be intimidating, because I played a game too with older players, and they know so much more than I do. But this is the third reason, tying into that. And the third reason is kind of what I guess some people would consider a wrong reason, or an arrogant reason to be in this game. But the other reason is because I want to fit in. It's a selfish reason. I want to fit in. I want to be a part of this community. I want to create. I created a workshop because I want people to know that I know what I'm talking about. I've never felt like I belong into any communities that I've been a part of. Ever since I was a kid, I never felt like I belonged in school. I never felt I belonged in one school. I had to change districts because I didn't feel like I belonged. And even when I was there, I was parts of 2 different worlds that I still didn't feel like I belonged in. And I had to work as hard as I could to show people and prove to them that I did. I was a part of my church council. I was the youngest person that was ever on church council, and I still didn't feel like I belonged in my church community. I felt like I was just taking up space. I don't think I belong in my theater community, in the acting world, but I want to belong, and I want to belong into this world. And I have seen so many people in this world who dedicate their lives to this, and this is the biggest thing. I see so many people invest their time and effort into lore and crafting and everything, and they're so focused on creating their worlds and focusing to a point on different events, and they want to make something happen. They want so desperately for things to occur, and they laugh and they joke about potentially killing their players. And to me, I see those people and I think, what are you doing? There's a part of me that just doesn't understand what current dungeon masters are doing. I've been at tables where dungeon masters have gotten in arguments with other players who are just as experienced as they are, and they yell at them and they make the environment awful. That experience I had 4 years ago that turned me off from this game completely, I had a similar experience like that about it again a year and 2 months ago. I went to a public game, and this dungeon master, this young woman dungeon master, I think she was in her late 20s, she yelled and cursed at an 11-year-old kid who was with his younger siblings at this table. She yelled at him. And yes, he was one of those kids that's like really wanting to share his knowledge, and he's looked up a lot of YouTube videos and looked into all the infernal and like Waterdeep, Eberron, and all the other stuff I don't care about. But she yelled at a player who was less than half her age, and there was a feeling in my body that just said, I want to get out of this. I never want to play this game again. I went back to 4 years ago. And a part of me just said, you know what? No. I want to be here. And I want to run this table so that stuff like that never happens. I want to be a part of this community because I know I belong here. I belong at the head of the table so that nobody feels that way again. Nobody feels that that should be taken away from them. That they should feel uncomfortable or that they should feel upset about choices that they're making. And how that session ended, the kid cast a spell that she didn't like and she ended the session. That's it. There was nothing. He cast a spell and that was it. And I never want my players to think that if they're going to make a choice that I'm not okay with, that that's going to be the end of it. That's not okay with me. And so the reason I'm here is those 3 reasons. I'm doing this because of my family, and there's a spiritual connection here. There is a connection deeper within me that I cannot neglect. I want to be here from the new players, for the old players, for people to have a fun time and enjoy themselves. And I want to be here because I want people to know that if with all the work that you put into this, it doesn't matter if you're a new player. It doesn't matter if you're new as a dungeon master. So long as you do not break the trust that is put into this game, so long as you don't make other people feel bad. And I feel like reaching out to people with this and letting them know that they are welcome and that every idea you have has potential. You can create a great story and you can create a great gaming environment and it can be fun. And you don't need to feel like you don't fit into something because you do. It doesn't matter how much work you put into it. Everyone deserves to be at the table. And that's the 3rd reason. I'm asserting myself at this table. I want everyone else to feel like they can assert themselves too, no matter how new or old they are. They come to the table and it's like, I'm here. I'm here for you. I'm here for me. And that's why I want to be a dungeon master. I hope this helps inspire you guys to answer the question as well. And if you want to let me know. I'd be interested in hearing from you. But really, make it for yourself. Open up to yourself and be honest. So that when you look in the mirror and you're getting talked to, like your family is saying, why are you spending all this time on this? And you're getting jokes for you're like, you got no players at your table. Not yet, you don't. But you will. I'm going to help you get to the place where you feel confident to provide an environment for those players. But the next time you look in the mirror and you've answered that question, I want you to look in that mirror and I want you to really see yourself. So, that's part 1. Part 2 of this introduction is going to be a little bit more diving into the book. Only a couple pages though. We're going to be looking at considerations for what kind of game you want to run, what kind of world you want to have. But that's going to be a video for another time. Until then, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope that this was a good part 1 for you. And as always, take care.